Hi, I'm Andrew Spieler.
And I'm Mary Hope Rennie.
And you're watching or listening to Behind the Sign, real stories from real estate. So welcome back to another episode of Behind the Sign. We're super excited because we have not one, but two special guests today who are both wearing black and blue. So, Mary Hope, would you mind introducing our awesome guests?
Yes. Well, thank you, ladies, for coming and joining us. We have Amy and Cathy from Monarch Title, and Monarch Title is in our office. We have part ownership in it and one of our close partners in our office. And so, Cathy and Amy, what we've been doing is really getting behind the sign, which is the name of our podcast, on what does real estate really look like, right? From start to finish, as an agent, as a client, in the process, because at least from my experience, people want to get into real estate because they love showing houses, right? Isn't that fun? You never get to get into houses.
You talk about houses.
Yes. But there's a lot of fluffy ideas of what real estate is. And also, because we don't have an agent here, speaking from an agent's perspective, a lot of times clients don't realize how much goes into it from an agent's perspective, working with our partners. For example, you two. And so what I wanted to dive into today is, first of all, to get to know you two, because you're kind of the magic sauce that gets this rolling, right? And people can't close and buy a house without a title company or a law office. And so I want to get to know you two personally and what got you in, and then kind of from your perspective, how this process runs. So Cathy, I'd love you to introduce yourself, but most importantly, how did you get into title? Like, most people don't grow up saying, I want to work in title when I grow up, right? Or maybe you did.
Very true. Well, thank you for inviting us. My name is Cathy Casazza, and I've been doing real estate closings since 1984.
Wow.
So
That was when I was born, just flagging that.
I was just about to say, I think we've all been born, but I forgot she was a little younger than us.
yeah. So in high school,
So you were 5 when you started too.
Yeah, right, something like that. I was in high school when I started to work for a law firm in Nashua, and my first experience in the title field was looking at legal descriptions. Very exciting stuff. So when I was in high school, after school, I would go into the law firm, and I was trained on how to read a deed, prepare a new deed, and find all the information that I needed to help the attorney get ready for a closing. And that was really my first introduction to real estate. And when I was deciding what to do with myself after high school, the woman that I was working for, she told me to join her full time. And that's what I did. So that's how I got into title. And I was lucky enough that the attorney that I worked for trained me to read absolutely everything that ever came my way. So every document from start to finish. And he explained to me that it was not a waste of time to be reading. So I'm one of those people that when you hand me a document, I start at the top and I go all the way through. So that gives me the ability to really see the big picture as I look at the entire thing. And that initial training has really helped me in the years that I've been working, because I bring that skill to everything that I do, which is how often I find myself on the phone with KW agents who are working on transactions and need someone to do that read from start to finish.
You mean agents don't always read all the fine print?
Well, often when they get started with reading the fine print, it can be very overwhelming. So to have someone with a professional eye take a look at these documents is really helpful. So that's how I got into title. And frankly, I evolved from there along the way with my skills training other people the way that I had been trained. So that's kind of where I've come along through the decades of working, is training other young people with those skills of doing the research and putting it all together, and following process and procedure to be sure you're doing a smooth, efficient, and accurate real estate closing. So that's really how I came into it.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. How long have you been with Monarch Title?
6 years.
6 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it was a great opportunity to come and join them. Ken and Andy Gould, who are the attorneys behind the scenes, they are old school, conservative, do it the right way kind of attorneys who I really enjoy working for. So I've worked in many different situations, from large title companies to small title companies, and I really enjoy working for them because I know exactly what their moral compass is. They're always going to do the right thing.
Mhm.
They're always thorough. They are ready and willing to communicate. So for me, it's a fabulous place to be because I've got the attorney support that I need to do what I specialize in, and I know exactly how they handle things.
Yeah.
So
That's great.
yeah.
That's great. Well, Amy,
Hi.
tell us a little bit about you and how you got into the world of title, how you got here, and yeah, a little bit about you.
My history didn't start when I was 5, although I was
Well, it did
5
start when you
when you started yours. I actually started at the Credit Bureau Services of New Hampshire working on mortgage credit reports.
Oh, that sounds as exciting as reading deeds to me.
So it spiraled from there. I started with that. I worked with a lot of mortgage people, and they asked me, hey, when you're done with this, do you want to move over to the mortgage end? And I did. I was at the Credit Bureau Services of New Hampshire for a couple of years. Got hired by, it wasn't Regency Mortgage, but somebody right before that, and
Okay.
worked for them for, I was in that end of it, probably 20 years of mortgage lending. And then I had my son, Grayson. You'll see him around the office. He's 9, almost 10. And I took a little bit of a break.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm like, I'm ready to go back to work. And that's when I said, maybe the title side of it. And somebody who's an agent here referred me over here.
Okay.
And met with Ken and Andy and everybody, Mark, Bill. That was one heck of a room sitting in there with everybody.
How many years ago was that?
That was 8 years ago.
Yeah.
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 And I've been here ever since and loving it.
Well, it's neat that you both come from such different worlds, right? Of reading deeds and mortgage, yet we're all, again,
Yeah.
we're in the same business, yet you're able to look at things from your perspective of the legality, the just being very exact and reading through and understanding. And you're coming from being able to deal with the lenders and that process, because that's we met, we talked with Joe Gagnon and interviewed him. That's a whole process in and of itself before it even touches your lap. But if you can understand that, and I think that's so important for agents to also understand all these steps, because we kind of get thrown into all the avenues, right? And we can't be the experts of all of that.
Well, I was going to say, to me, title is sort of like the black box of the process, right? It's like, what goes into that and what comes out of it and why, right? And I think a lot of agents, especially when you're first starting, right? When I was doing my studying to get licensed, I was trying to understand title. And I remember driving around here and seeing all these like title companies on the sides of vans. And I grew up in Mass, and then I was out in California. Title was a new term to me. I was like, what is title? What is that? What does that involve? So I guess if you were to speak to somebody who has never bought or sold real estate, as a potential buyer seller, or somebody who's getting into real estate as an agent, what would be your sort of efficient way of explaining what title is and why it's, I think, ultimately kind of like the most important part of the puzzle, which is why it's so complicated. But to kind of relay that to anybody who's never even heard the word title or deed before.
Yeah, it's a very interesting concept for a lot of people, and it's not a product. So
Right.
it's kind of an invisible item.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit harder for people to kind of understand. So from a title perspective, when I'm talking to a first-time home buyer and they say, "Why do I need a title company?" What I explain to them is in our role, we are often hired after the contract is signed. So the property's already been identified, the offer's been made and accepted. They've likely already even started their loan application. We then are pulled into the process either by the KW agent, who lets us know they've just gone under contract and has sped the contract over to us to be sure pace is kept, or we'll get the order directly from the lender first. So our role in that situation is to gather all the historical information about the title, looking back in the deeds for an appropriate period of time to be sure it is free and clear of all liens. So the seller doesn't have a mortgage or an unpaid tax or some other item that needs to be taken care of monetarily through the sales price, and also to see if there are any rights the buyer or the lender need to be aware of, such as an easement, a right-of-way, a shared driveway, restrictions. So our role is generally to gather all that information and check that backwards to be sure we have covered an appropriate period of time looking for all those types of things. So there's a chain of the title. So we look at who owns it currently, what they've done with it. Then we look backwards. Who did they get it from? What did they do with it? And we keep circling back until we get to an appropriate stop point where we can feel confident then when this title is transferred that the buyer is getting a title that has a good, clean history.
And that nobody else owns it.
Nobody
Pretty much.
owns it, or there isn't a right that the buyer is unaware of. And the things that often come up when I'm talking to either an agent or a buyer is something they weren't aware of before talking with us.
Right.
So from time to time, a deed that the seller might have of record that's referenced in the listing or in the P&S will be a very brief deed. It'll have, who bought it, who sold it, what, and where their last deed was, but it won't say much about their rights. And that's because perhaps the last draft of that document was done by a company that wasn't as thorough in including all of the past history in that deed. When our company drafts a deed, we include the past history so it kind of all flows forward easily, but that doesn't always happen. So often when we're starting discussions, we're letting people know about things they didn't see in the last deed, or perhaps were not in the listing. So we, from time to time, are helping with due diligence. So the due diligence is really a process that's done between the buyer and the agents, but we are often lending a helping hand with pulling out documents that might be helpful.
So would I be characterizing this correctly in that title is obviously super necessary, and if it goes smoothly, then great, everything's fine, right? But you're dealing with clients and agents who have already made a deal, right? And they're all thinking, we're good. And then you have to come in and say, actually, 3 owners ago, there was a goat farm on the property, and therefore what's in the current contract cannot stand. And you have to deliver some relatively bad news to the parties who are expecting everything to go along. Can that happen?
It can. So
Not sure about goat farm, but
Sure. Yeah.
that's an interesting one.
Yeah, check me on that one.
So often we do have to share information about the title to the property that can be unfortunate. But my method of sharing that information is I will have my report back from my examiner, go over it with my attorney, and determine what the problem is and what the path to fix it would be. I like to tell people by phone if there's something that I'm concerned about.
That's
And
why
follow
when
that.
your number comes up for agents, they're like, uh-oh, what's wrong with my contract? Cathy's calling me.
Kathy's calling. The principal's calling. I like to share it by phone first because nothing's worse than an agent being at a inspection or a walkthrough or an appointment and having them look at their phone and see bad news. So I like to explain it. It's less scary when they hear about it by phone. And then I follow it up with a very thorough email describing the problem, attaching any relevant documents, and giving them the path of what can be done next. I don't share bad information without the possible solution. In most cases, a solution can
Absolutely.
be found. It's very rare to have something catastrophic. And if there is something catastrophic, there are plenty of times where we have a stopgap measure such as if it's a title problem that needs a petition to quiet title to clear. We normally come with an estimate and potential referrals, all sorts of ways we can help people through the process.
Yeah.
Because our mission, honestly, is to help the agent get that buyer to the table, keep those moving trucks coming, and not delay the closing. And we are very thorough, and we find probably more problems than average because we do a very
Good at your
thorough,
job.
we have a very thorough job. And we also go back the appropriate length of time based on the New Hampshire title standards. We don't do an abbreviated search. An abbreviated search would take less time. We'd probably find less problems. However, one of the things that we've come to know is that KW agents, when they work with that buyer, they keep in contact.
Right.
3 years from now, when that buyer's ready to sell, that
Yeah.
transactions can be right back
Title
in the
karma.
building. And that agent's going to be selling that property again. And the last thing that agent needs is a resale 3 years from now that they did the purchase on and have it not go well. So as a result of that, working with an old school title company who does a thorough job is really important.
Yeah.
Because the KW agents can rely on the next transaction 3 years from now. It's going to go smooth because we buttoned it up
Yeah.
on the first round. So that's, part of the method that we've always used over the, 20 years that the Monarch business has been here.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, and so I think even as agents, we know that's going on in the background, but we kind of push it aside. We want all the fluff, the frills, the feel goods, all of that. So when they send it over to you guys and you get that, you pull the title. After let's just say it's a nice, clean title all the way back 175 years.
To the goat farm.
That's right, the goat farm from 175 years.
What you say in title is it's clear all the way back to the King's Grant.
There you go.
King's Grant.
Look at that.
Wow. It's like Game of Thrones.
That's right. So once that's cleared, what's the next step? Maybe, Amy, you can kind of where does it go from there? Once they've said, okay, this is a clean title, where do we move from there?
It depends on if it's a cash transaction or if it's a lender finance.
See, here comes your mortgage background, right? No, it's that is a big deal. It's a big difference.
It really is. So if it's a cash transaction, those typically we can get closed as long as everything's good with title within a couple of weeks.
Right.
And then it's just working with the buyers, the sellers, the agents to schedule a closing date as long as we have everything in that we need. With the lender transaction, we work directly with the lender. We go on their timeline, making sure that they have everything that they need on their end, that the buyer's clear to close. And then our paralegals will work with the lender to go ahead and finalize all the documents for the closing.
So what would be an example of something that a lender would need from the title company?
Often they'll rely on us for proof of authority. So let's say the seller happens to be an LLC. So they might want to be sure that the person who signed the contract had authority to sign the contract, so they'll look to us for proof of authority. So we do the research and provide that. Sometimes they'll want copies of restrictions, or they'll want information from a HOA. So we help them gather that. So not only are we doing the research on the history of the property, but we're also the gathering spot for all the information. So we're asking the buyer how they want to hold title. Are they going to attend the closing? How they want their name listed on the deed, things like that. And we're relaying all that information to the lender. The lender's also looking for all the information about the agent's license numbers and all those things. So we gather all of that information and provide that in a package to the lender. So that's what we refer to as title docs. So it's our mission to open the file, do the research as quickly as we can, let the agent know if there's good news, title is good to go, and get those title documents out to the lender. In the meantime, we're chasing the buyer to find out what they want to do. Are they going to attend the closing? How they want to hold title? And then we're asking the seller a much larger number of questions. Do they have a mortgage? Did they receive the property in more than one deed? Have they cut down trees on their property? Is there a timber tax coming? Is their property,
Timber tax.
is there a current use that they're cited to? We ask them if they filed bankruptcy. Are they in foreclosure? So we ask them a lot of very personal questions up front. Are they a citizen? And so all these questions and answers are really important. And depending on what the answers are, how complicated things might be. So we have to work our way through that process. So often what happens for us is that, especially with these homes that are empty, and you can see
Yeah.
a variety of homes that are
Right.
on the market are staged very well, and they're nearly empty.
Right.
And when these transactions are moving quickly, sometimes a transaction can go from a closing date that's 3 weeks away from now to next week.
Yes.
So having the parties work with us to gather that information quickly is really important. So we have a fabulous process we use called Closing Lock, where we ask them all their questions securely in a portal where they can see our wiring instructions, and the seller can give us their wiring instructions, and we can exchange their documents in a secure fashion.
So, wow, I have like so many questions. But
Andrew is learning about espressos for the first time. I love it.
so there's three questions I want to ask. One, I'm going to save for like a future episode because I think we could do a whole episode just on it, and that's about like kind of the security measures you were just talking about and how many scams there have been with people on the mortgage and the and like how it can kind of work and
The stories from
against it.
Cathy's files.
yes, exactly. But the other kind of two combo question is obviously New Hampshire is a state that goes through the use of a title company as opposed to lawyers, right, for closings. Massachusetts, our neighbor, is a lawyer state. Can you speak a little bit about what that difference means and maybe why it is sort of different state to state? And we spoke with Joe last time a little bit about the fact that you are sort of towards the end of the process, and as far as your business coming to you, you're, I would assume, pretty dependent upon the agents recommending to their clients to use Monarch, right? Is that how you get referrals and business? So because like Joe was saying, it's rare that a buyer is going to go out and get approved for a mortgage before they find an agent. It's usually the other way around. They find the agent, and then the agent guides them through the process of the steps they need to do. So the importance of cementing those relationships and fostering and retaining, agents through any forms that you do to ensure that sort of business stays busy and active, especially as the market goes up and down. What approach you take for that, and again, if there was a new agent out there who was sort of like, okay, well, I got to find my mortgage person, I got to find my staging person, I got to find my title person, right? What are the things that they should be looking for and asking from title folks as they're going about figuring out who to sort of partner with?
Gotcha. That was a lot of questions.
I know. I'm sorry. I was.
Wait, I'm from Massachusetts, New Hampshire attorney.
Let's. You know what?
To marketing.
Good questions.
We'll do a quick answer on the lawyer marketing one because I think the relationship side of it is really important.
So New Hampshire versus Massachusetts,
Yeah,
lawyer
sure.
versus title.
So in regards to that, one of the things that we find as people are crossing borders, and there are many number of agents here who sell in both places. So in Massachusetts, it is an attorney-driven process from the initial offer to the drawing of the P&S, which is a second stage in Massachusetts. So attorneys are heavily involved, and there are very defined lanes as to who's doing what. And part of the reason for that in Massachusetts is the Massachusetts bar has been very, very protective of the real estate business in the state of Massachusetts, very organized. Okay. In New Hampshire, I would say the attorneys were way more informal as real estate closings were modernizing, and they were not as formalized as their friends in Massachusetts. So as a result of that, what ended up happening in the 80s is title companies started to come in as mortgage companies started to lend versus banks. So back in the 80s, there were a few banks in the area downtown who would give a mortgage. It was a very bank-driven process. And the closing happened at the bank, and there were 4 pieces of paper. But
There's only 6 now, right?
1,000.
yes. So as that process started to change in New Hampshire, attorneys were not on the ball with recognizing that if they wanted to do this process and procedure in the law firm, they needed to be
Right.
organized. Is the very word.
Yeah.
So the market changed before they caught on to the changes. The good news about that is that title companies tend to be more affordable for the consumer.
Mm.
And that's one of the things that the KW agents find about Monarch is from a pricing perspective, we keep our prices modest. We're not billing by the hour. Or we don't charge for cancellations, things of that nature. So that's one of the big differences between the states. And also in New Hampshire, the title company really does kind of all sides.
Right.
So KW agents who sell primarily in New Hampshire get very used to the title company
Taking care of
taking care of
Yeah.
A to Z.
Right.
When a Massachusetts law firm does a New Hampshire closing, they often are quite surprised.
Don't let me
by-
sweat too much.
Yes, by the lack of help
Mm.
with gathering information
Yeah.
Yeah.
that they run into with a Massachusetts attorney doing a New Hampshire closing. So unless that Massachusetts attorney has adapted their New Hampshire transactions to the New Hampshire customs, agents are going to find that
Perhaps.
they're going to have more homework to do.
Yeah.
Like they might have to get the final reading themselves,
Right.
get the seller's information themselves, all sorts of things that they are not used to doing
Mm.
and don't have the expertise to do.
Mhm.
So we are often fielding questions when they're in that
Yes.
spot. So we recommend to agents who are listing a property to be sure that they do pay attention to where the buyer's agent is intending to close that transaction, preferably with a New Hampshire company to keep things running in a customary fashion.
Well, I was thinking when you were saying that, it kind of goes into Andrew's second question about that relationship. And I feel like what you were mentioning is there's much more interaction with not only the buyer and seller, but the agent, and they're all working together in this process as opposed to staying in their lanes where the title company is able to kind of meld that all. So if there are gaps, it kind of gets filled in. And I think that's why the relationships with the title company between the agent and lender and the title company is so important because it's people.
Yes.
And who you trust you're going to work with and who you want. If someone has had a good experience before, they're more likely, right? And if there's a little kink, if it's not taken care of, they're going to be hesitant. So maybe, Amy, you can answer kind of how you see working with agents and lenders and how you can help them with their process, because you guys know a lot more about this process than we do, yet a lot of this process in New Hampshire falls on agent shoulders to make sure that's who's going to, when there's an issue at closing, it's the agent having to be the first one on, on the line calling the seller or the buyer usually. So having that good relationship, what is that you think Monarch is able to give to agents and lenders and provide that connection?
We start ahead of time. I feel like I start building, or we all start building that relationship with the agents even before a home goes under contract. So I'll help real estate agents with open houses, pulling deeds initially when they have their listing appointment. And that way they have the deed.
Yeah.
We provide that free of charge. And Cathy's always available when they receive that deed if they have any questions to go over that with her so that they're prepared for their listing appointment. And then when they list it, sometimes I get the calls asking if I can help with the open house. And it's great. We get to spend some time with one another. I really like to know the agents on a more personal level, even outside of the office, so we can build that relationship and so that you can learn to trust me. You have my cell phone number.
Yep.
I do get phone calls, text messages, weekends, evenings, but I love that. I want people to trust me and to know that I'm always there, because I know you as real estate agents, you're working 24/7. It's
Right.
not an 8 to 5 job. So if you need me at 7 o'clock at night, I may tell you, you're going to hear my dishes and my pans in the background. I'm cooking dinner, but I'm here to help you if I can.
Yeah.
Helping them, we do a closings 101 training. So I
Mhm.
try to help all the new agents learn the process, everything that we're going over today, because it is overwhelming.
Right.
And the title portion of it, a lot of people don't even realize that you need. So they know we need a lender, we need an agent, we need an appraiser, a home inspection. Title. What's title?
It's so true. Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes even when I finish the closings, some buyers have said to me before, "You did a really good job. I'm not sure what Monarch Title really did." Because sometimes the buyers, if it's a separate transaction,
Right.
they don't know what we did. You as real
Absolutely.
estate agents do, but that's good to us though too. because
Absolutely.
We
That means you did your job right.
exactly.
That there.
And you just
Stress free.
That's right. That's right.
Visible.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So really, what you're saying is Monarch and Title in general are ninjas, really, right?
Ultimately.
That's ultimately,
Ninjas.
yeah.
That's her new name. Ninja Cathy. Ninja Amy.
Well, I'd like to thank you both for coming on the show and talking about this sort of elusive topic that I think a lot of people should invest more time in getting to know better, especially if they're interested in getting into real estate, because it is that thing that you need to sort of forecast out and have help with from the inception point of the conversation of listing of a home and to understand the legal side of it. Right. I think even though agents aren't necessarily lawyers, having an understanding of the process and what legal ramifications could come up, I think is an important thing, right?
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
will you both come back and talk a little more about
There's lots we can
other?
Well, that's
Okay.
what I was realizing. We didn't even touch the closing table,
I
any
know.
of that.
Well,
Yes.
but thank you so much for having us.
Of course.
We love being a part of the Keller Williams family.
Well, we love having you guys, and we appreciate everything you do for our agents, for sure. So
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Thank you for coming on.
The closing table.
See you at the closing table. That's gonna get cut.
No, keep it. That's fine.
See you. That was his
They should all do it together.
See you. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Behind the Sign, Real Stories from Real Estate.
We hope you enjoyed today's conversation and gained a little insight into the world behind those for sale signs.
Today's episode was brought to you by Keller Williams Realty Metropolitan, proudly serving New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine, and Massachusetts. A special thank you to our agents, leadership, and partners at KW Metro for their continued support.
And thanks to you, our amazing listeners and viewers. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.
Leave us a review or comment. We love hearing your feedback, and it helps more people discover the show.
And if you have a real estate story you'd like to share or a question you want answered on a future episode, reach out to us at metro.kw.com or find us on Instagram, handle @KWMetroNH.
Until next time, we'll see you
Behind the Sign.